Okay, so this video is about what I'm calling the functional fetal position. So when you think about a typical fetal position, or most people think of when they think of fetal, they think of like kind of curling up into a ball, like a self-protective kind of state, or a state of comfort. You know, say you're not feeling well, you kind of curl up in that ball in fetal position. So a lot of people link that to, when you were actually a fetus, like in the womb, it's a position of comfort and nourishment and all that. But we're going to think of this a little differently here. So as a full-grown adult, there may be some tendencies like back to that, but also there is a functional component to a fetal position, especially if you maintain a neutral spine while you're achieving a fetal position. So you think of something like a squatting motion where you're more flexed, or even in sitting, perhaps we can reduce the stress of our own weight through our body when we think of more of a fetal or functional fetal position for sitting. So one of the problems with sitting, at least in an upright kind of chair position, the way most of us in the US are accustomed to, is that it seems like it's a relaxed position, and oftentimes we do relax into that position, which also causes problems, because the weight distribution gets off and everything. But it also tends to create a lot of tightness in the hip flexors and the low back. So a lot of people are familiar with the experience of, when you go to get up from sitting, it's like, oh, it's hard to straighten out and stand up tall, because you have to extend and stretch your muscles that have gotten tight, including the hamstrings as well. So, if you think about what would negate that or change that dynamic, not just sitting up tall, but understanding the kind of the flow through the body, or how to direct the flow through the body. So one thing that I've observed is that, a lot of people, specifically in other countries or other cultures, that have this element as part of their daily practice for various reasons, but usually it's oftentimes just culturally, the norm, is this idea of like a deep squat. And even for those of us who don't practice that, or our cultures don't practice that, at one point, if you go back far enough, you did, right? Or your descendant or your ancestors did. So basically, you think about a deep squat as like coming down and then kind of being able to sit onto the heels. Okay, so it's kind of a back and then dropping down, and at which point your chest lifts up. Now, I'm not particularly good at this. I haven't been practicing it long enough. But compensation that most of us will make if we are able to get down to that position is to kind of stay up on the toes. So you're kind of like here versus with the heel down. Because oftentimes I can kind of keep my chest forward here, but you'll see, even if I'm on my toes, I'm gonna be arching my back a little more. If I go to the heels, it rolls my weight back too much and I start to fall, and then I collapse up here. So the ideal is to be able to go flat on the heels and keep your chest up and forward and keep your body aligned. Speaking of alignment, if you're familiar with the squatty potty, or that kind of idea of like aligning things so that you can better go use the bathroom, that's the idea that, before the advent of upright toilets, human beings used to have to squat in that fashion to, go number two. So it actually aligns our bowels better when we're in that position. And if you have a little something here, you also, to get in that position, you have to be able to pull that in, and just those knees coming up, it does put a little pressure on the abdomen to help kind of guide things down and out. But to do that, you may have to actually pull in. So I'm actually going to go into a lying down position, and this can be helpful for sleep as well, for comfort. So one might think that if you're in that fetal position, your hip flexors might get tight, just like when I demonstrated with sitting. But what I found is that once you go deep enough into that squat position, what happens is they switch off. So there's not really a need for them to fire, and so they don't. So if you're having trouble with tight hip flexors, this could be actually beneficial, so that when you wake up in the morning, you might actually be less tight and stiff. And the other benefit is it does open up the low back.